Jean-Baptiste Vianney was born of very pious parents in 1786 at Tartilly, which is not too far from Lyon. But he was only 5 when the Terreur broke out in Paris. Indeed, he received his first communion at a time when the troops of the French Revolution passed through the region and closed the parish church. The providential influence of a very holy priest helped him on his way, both in discernment and in education. L'Abbé Ballet, particularly, he actually helped him in his initial studies at home, and unfortunately he was drafted by error really into the army, and he managed to wriggle out, to escape under very dangerous circumstances, and in the following year, 1810, Napoleon gave an armistice with regard to those who had actually deserted, an amnesty, and so he was able to return to his home, and the following year to enter the major seminary. But he was, because of the fact that he'd spent his youth really as a shepherd boy, very slow in picking things up, especially Latin, but it wasn't that he was dull, it's just that his brain hadn't been exercised. Indeed, he had quite an acumen for things, as it turned out in his later life, one can see. Initially he helped Abbé Ballet as curate until he actually died, and then he was given a very small parish church, that of Ars. He worked patiently to bring back morals and practice to a parish which had gone down over the years, and he made it a very practicing parish by his penance and good teaching and personal care for his flock. His gifts eventually came to the fore, and he became well known. He had the gifts, you could see what was in people's hearts and history, and sometimes in their future. And so they flocked. Of course, he was attacked by the demon, sometimes spectacularly. The demon was obliged to admit at one point, "Give me 3 like him and I'm done for." But he had gems of sayings and teachings. Unfortunately, we can still pick them up because a lot of them were written down. Private prayer, for instance, he said, is like straw scattered here and there. If you set it on fire, it makes a lot of little flames. But gather these straws into a bundle and light them, and you get a mighty fire, rising like a column into the sky. Public prayer is like that. So he spared himself not at all, very little sleep, very little to eat, and he died eventually of exhaustion at the age of 74, as he had predicted, peacefully and without fear. And he did have this to say: "C'est bon mourir, c'est bon mourir quand on a vécu sur la croix. It is beautiful to die when one has lived on the cross." He had a great devotion to the Blessed Sacrament, and indeed his altar boys did not miss the fact that he was occasionally not touching the ground. They could see he's actually not touching the ground right now. Therefore there was some ecstatic mode going on there, and one can see that in his face. He was also caught in ecstasy once or twice. He once muttered, "Attention à ma bague, careful of my ring." He was wearing some kind of ring, mystical espousals, and he saw the Blessed Virgin one time. We know that things would go on therefore in the mystical realm. But the way that he helped souls is very interesting, and we have volumes of testimonies of that. Each story a gem in itself. People would go with questions of vocation and have very unexpected answers. Some towards it and some against it, but always for a better reason. There was one case, for instance, of a young man who wanted to become a priest. The Curé saw into the future and said, "Mariez-vous, marry. Write it down, please." And he wrote it down, and he did marry, and from that marriage came about 10 priests, including 1 or 2 bishops. And another time a girl came, about 18 years old, without any idea of vocation, and the good priest said, "Vous serez religieuse, you will be a nun," and she protested, "No, no, 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 no," and he replied, "Si, si, 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 si," and she did. Another time a hunter came, out of curiosity what's going on in this church. He thundered in and went up, and what was his surprise when he put his gun down when the curé said, "Vous irez à la trappe, you will go to la trappe." He was quite taken aback, but apparently he did, and became a holy Trappist. Here is la trappe. Now, with regard to France, I was in France in the years when there was a huge charismatic renewal going on, and we were slightly involved, and we became aware of the power of this renewal. And in 1986, I was able to go to Ars, where there was a massive national convention going on, and all the gifts were at work, and they were spectacular. Thousands upon thousands of people there. They were just so used to the supernatural, they almost handled it glibly. They believed so much in the power of God and His providence. For instance, no fee, just a donation. And we're talking about thousands of people coming. In the previous year, there'd been so many who had come, they'd run out of food. They kept on giving out what they had, and they noticed that there was a miraculous multiplication of food going on in their hand. And of course, all this was being videoed, and it was interesting to see prophecy being fulfilled. But when I was there was miracle upon miracle, and all the gifts of knowledge and so on, combined. It was very moving. And so that evening I quietly wrote and reflected that, having been exposed to the power of the same Holy Spirit at Ars, as had been there before, at work in the Curé Vase way back previously, there could be no going back. One had to listen to the voice of the Spirit and see that there was power at work which was not to be quenched, and one had to be part of it and not a quencher thereof. And it was interesting that it was the same power that had gone through the centuries, the same Spirit, century after century coming through, as way back in the Celtic Church. We have the same gifts in different form coming through. We noticed that St. David, for instance, always has the dove on his shoulder. Powerful preaching. and the ground, of course, rising under his feet, Atlandavi Brevi. Again, the spirit of power, the word of fire. And so it was that quietly I wrote these lines, thinking and meditating that this unchanging power must be grasped and not put away. Achse. Here it begins. Henceforth, but one sole way can ever lie before my startled eyes. What hath this night been known is known for aye, and yesterday no more its lost plaint cries. A trembling of two worlds hath touched this hour, and in this eve a passing of an age, long buried long ago, its ancient power hath left to linger on this oft read page. For though I came not this strange way before, and heard not words like these, nor saw such things, I stare where 'tis not rare that on this shore of puzzlement some pause where it still sings a song of myriad aeons long unknown, that have returned, and history overthrown. À la mesure et sans mesure de ton immensité, tu nous manques, Seigneur. Le pauvre seul peut t'accueillir, le cœur tout plein d'amour, les yeux tournés vers ta lumière. Joie et lumière de la gloire éternelle du Père, le très haut, le très saint, ô Jésus-Christ, parvenu à la fin du jour, contemplons cette clarté dans le soir, chantons le Père et le Fils et le Saint-Esprit de Dieu. Joie et lumière de la gloire éternelle du Père, le très haut, le très saint, ô Jésus-Christ. Oui, tu es digne d'être chanté dans tous les temps par les voix sanctifiées. Fils de Dieu qui donne vie, tout l'univers te rend gloire. Joie et lumière de la gloire éternelle du Père, le très haut, le très saint, ô Jésus-Christ.